Welcome back. Let's have a look at some further attributes of emotional intelligence as they relate to parenting. Firstly, positive discipline. As children get older, the parenting duties subtly change from physical care to more psychological guidance. We have to recognize that our influence and control will also diminish, often in proportion to the rising influence both in school and outside. The purpose is to teach them self-discipline, responsibility for their actions, and problem-solving skills. It's based on mutual trust and cooperation so that eventually the teenagers are motivated to do the right things for themselves. So set some ground rules and expectations. It's important that teenagers learn about accountability. So setting the rules around certain behaviors should come with consequences if they're not followed. So for example, a request to clean their bedroom should be quietly requested, along with the reason why it is important to have a tidy bedroom. This should come with an incentive as opposed to the threat of punishment. For example, you'll offer to drive them to the game store next week if the room is kept tidy. Of course, if they don't tidy their room, then there are consequences, and the trip to the game store should be cancelled. It has to be a logical or natural consequence, just as getting drunk at night will result in a hangover the next morning. This is where you need to be strong, because often what will happen is that the situation is that the teenager will shout and pout and the parent may cave in just for a peaceful life. But if you do that, what is it that you're really teaching the teenager? You're certainly not preparing them for the harsh realities of adult life. What you're really telling them is that people can be manipulated by whining, or even worse, forcing their own way through aggressive behavior. So being too strict or too permissive can be counterproductive. You need to be firm but fair. Relationship building. One of the most important EQ skills is the ability to forge productive relationships. I used to believe that this relationship would just happen naturally without much effort on my part, because my children would conform to my expectations. We sometimes forget that children develop personalities, interests, and aspirations in their own right, and these may be radically different to yours. So your definition of success might be very different to theirs. You may want them to be a doctor or a lawyer, but they may want to be an artist or similar that maybe lives from paycheck to paycheck. Whatever makes them happy. I feel that one of the key cornerstones of a good relationship is to always be there to encourage and support them in whatever they choose to do. I remember reading a story about a father who took his son to baseball week after week during the season. One week he bumped into his work colleague, and his colleague said, "Hey, fancy seeing you here. I thought you hated baseball." To which the father replied, "Yes, I hate baseball, but my son loves it, and I love my son more." So investing that time in building a relationship with them now and having good conversations around things that are happening in their life will really cement the relationship and will facilitate a great ongoing relationship later on when they are adults in their own right. Flexibility. Be flexible and adaptable in the way that you deal with them. It's important to remember that adolescence is a tumultuous time. Puberty to early adulthood is a really complex time. It's characterized by major brain growth, hormonal changes, physical, emotional, and social changes. The response you get may not be predictable and will often be dictated by how they're feeling in the moment, which may have arisen from circumstances or situations you're completely unaware of. In other words, don't expect that what works one time is going to necessarily work another time. Our prefrontal cortex, the rational brains, do not fully mature until around age 25, so give your teenager a break. One key to managing adolescence is to remember that short-term motivation is linked to the pleasure-pain centers, whereas long-term motivation is linked to the prefrontal cortex, which is not yet mature. Therefore, linking an undesirable behavior, for example skipping class, to a short-term consequence, you won't get your favorite breakfast made for you, should be far more effective than linking it to those long-term consequences. You won't graduate and you won't get into the college of your choice. The other thing to remember is that various studies show that boys mature more slowly than girls. Generally, it's around the 18 months time difference before it equalizes itself in later life. So all of those parents, all you parents of boys tearing your hair out, it's not just your boy. Optimism. Teenagers can be influenced by the way that you see life. Therefore, if you adopt a cheerful and optimistic outlook, you and they are less likely to feel depressed or pessimistic about life in general. Considering what we've just come out of, the pandemic, and looking at the complex range of challenges facing the human race, it's easy to feel pessimistic about the future. Watching the news today can be a sobering experience, but we cannot afford to convey that pessimism to our children. We need to be optimistic for them. Otherwise, they may start to feel a sense of hopelessness, which of course can lead to depression. Now, we can't shield our children from the realities of modern life, but what we can do is to talk to them about it. In my household, we discuss the news and what's going on in the world, but I'll always try to add a positive perspective to the conversation. For example, our discourse around the pandemic was to talk about the fantastic work that was going on in finding a vaccine and the fact that there are no limits to man's ingenuity in solving problems. So while there may be huge challenges ahead, there's also exciting opportunities. And if you turn the conversation into something positive, that will help to provide a more optimistic perspective for your teenager. Understanding. When the adolescents and teenagers respond emotionally, don't take it personally. It will pass like a storm. Teenagers may process information and instructions imperfectly. Remember, your message is passing through a storm of raging hormones. Receive the tempest with good humor and good grace, and take it seriously without getting angry yourself. Thank you.